Hey y'all, welcome to Southern Soul Chats. We are thrilled to have you with us today. As we prepare for season 4, we're taking a short break to reflect on the powerful teachings from our last season, First Steps. So last season, we dove into foundations of faith, where we explored who God is and his purpose for humanity. Now, over the next few weeks, we'll be revisiting real-life examples of people who have taken their first steps forward with God in their lives. These are past episodes featuring individuals who are on a journey of discovering a deeper relationship and trust with God, and their stories beautifully illustrate the transformation that happens when we align with his purpose. We hope these testimonies inspire you to continue your walk of faith. Hey y'all, I'm so glad you're here today. I have a question. We're going to start with a question. Have you ever wondered how far God will go to transform a life? If so, this episode is for you. In today's episode, we're going to introduce you to Bryan Kelley, a remarkable individual who served 2 decades behind bars for a tragic and life-altering mistake. Now, I'm going to give you a trigger warning that some of this information might be sensitive, or it might be something that you might want to just cautiously move through. But besides that, I think that you will see that we aim today to inspire hope and understanding and how God can move through even the most difficult circumstances. So without further ado, welcome, Mr. Kelley. We are so glad to have you.
Thank you, Miranda. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, I'm really excited. So I always like to let people know how I know our guest. Bryan and I attend church together. He's been there pretty much the whole time I think we've been there, but until a year ago, I didn't really know you. I didn't really know you personally, but I started serving in the, I went blank.
Regeneration.
That one, in the Regen program as a vocalist for the praise team. And I got to know you better and got to enter into a relationship with you. And it's been wonderful. And I've been just so impressed on how you daily model your relationship with Christ and the leader that you've become. And so I'm just really glad that you put your yes on the table and came and joined me today. Yay!
Well, it was easy to do. And I'll tell you what, I told the Lord a long time ago, my yes is on the table. And then I found out he will take you up on that, and he'll put you in places that you never dreamed, but it's always an adventure and it's always fun.
Yeah, it's true. When you really put your yes on the table, you better be serious. Because I'm learning that too. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we're just going to dig in and find out a little bit more about you. So why don't we start from the beginning, childhood, what your life was like, where's your family, family based in faith, was it not? So I'm just going to turn it over to you and let you tell your story.
Absolutely. I grew up in a small town in Kansas, just outside of Kansas City, kind of a farming community. My father and my mother divorced soon after I was born, and he took off and never really looked back. So it was always just my mom and me. Bless her heart, she had a high school diploma and not many other marketable skills. And so, finances were always a struggle. It seemed like the world was against us and that the world was usually winning. So we moved around a lot, and there was no other kids in my family that was about my age, and so it always seemed like I was dealing with adults. It always seemed like I was alone. Mom was at work or doing some stuff, and so I spent a lot of time at home alone, and so I knew loneliness, but I also knew industriousness, and I had to learn how to cook for myself and fend for myself and do some things. And so, there's blessings and difficulties that comes with that. But I would just say, life growing up for me was difficult, but not without love, not without joy and things like that. So, I've got nothing to complain about.
Right.
It just wasn't that easy.
Yeah, it wasn't just like all the extras that everybody seems to have these days. All the extras. So you have that in your home. You're with your mom. You have what you need. Your basic needs are met. That's what it seems like. But just like all single parents, I've been a single mom. It's a struggle. It's tough to make the ends meet and then make the time meet and struggle and juggle it all. Now, did you say yes or no to siblings? Did you have siblings?
No siblings.
So only child.
Only child.
Okay.
Just me and my mom.
Just you and your mom. Okay, so you grow up. Any church at all? Any faith-based at all?
There was a couple of times when family members would go to church. There was a time when I was about 6th grade that my cousins started going to a Pentecostal church, and And I went with them a few times, and that was all the way live. And so, it was very entertaining and high energy. And so I went and did that for a while. I was actually baptized when I was 12 with them. But as I was going out into the lake to get baptized, I told the pastor then, I said, I better not catch a cold from this. And so it kind of tells you where my mind was at, right? I was doing what everybody else was doing. I thought what I was supposed to do. But I didn't understand salvation and baptism and what I was doing. I was just trying to fit in.
Following the steps. Here's the steps. If you do this, then this happens. Yeah. So even at 12, I think even when kids get baptized now, it's so important. And I see our church do this, really sit down with them and make sure they understand. They ask them the process, and they ask them key questions, and they'll come back and tell you like, oh, I don't know that he's quite ready. Like, let's do a little more, let's spend a little more time. And I love that, because a lot of times you see it, I saw it growing up around church camp time. Everybody went and had a really good time. A lot of kids are going down, and then you feel like, well, maybe I should too. And to be honest with you, I can't tell you how many times I rededicated my life at church camp. I've probably rededicated my life more than my fingers and toes. And I look back as an adult and I go, did I really even understand what rededicate means? Or was it just everybody was doing it? And the sermon was, if you're not doing the right thing, you need to rededicate. Well, I'm pretty sure I'm not, so let's go do it. So so I can completely relate, and I have a feeling our listeners can too. So you're a child, things are tough. What happens next in life? So,
I was a little fat kid growing up. I was object of ridicule from the kids around me, and I was lonely, not a lot of self-worth. And so when I hit junior high, golly, I shot up about a foot overnight, it seemed like. And because I'd been carrying all that weight, I was one of the strongest kids in school. And so like overnight, I became the best athlete. And with that came love and applause and, recognition and popularity. And I started dating a cheerleader, and I was leading the football team and things. And it's just incredible. And during that social awakening, I discovered alcohol. Me and my friends would raid liquor cabinets of our parents, or we'd have older kids buy us some beer or whatever. And so I tied those two things together, alcohol and the fun, the frivolity and everything that I was enjoying. They just seemed to go together. It was a package deal. And so ever since I was about 12, 13, alcohol has been a big part of my life.
Yeah, so it's funny because you say you had this day and night. It's almost like the swan moment, the ugly duckling goes to a swan moment. And there's a lot that comes with that. You get all the recognition and the love and the praise, and you're the football person and you're the biggest guy out there. But a lot of times kids, even adults, don't know what to do with that.
No, I didn't know at all. And, I feasted on it and I loved it. And that became a driving force in my life. And since alcohol was so tied to it, and I felt bulletproof when I was drinking, I just turned to that. If a little bit of alcohol could do that, then more has got to be better.
Yeah, more is going to really take you over the top. So I'm guessing that this bleeds into your high school years, and that cycle continues.
Fortunately, I was a good student most of the time. That would fall apart towards the end, but I learned early on that I could get love and attention by doing good things or bad things, and so I could do good at school. I get a lot of praise, and so I benefited from doing that. And the same thing with sports. If I shine in sports, I could get love and attention. So I did those things well. But there was a transfer that happened, late high school years, to where I was just relying on drugs and alcohol, partying. I felt like I could party better than anybody, right? And I was leading all of my friends down all the wrong paths to party. As a matter of fact, I was fairly small high school, and I orchestrated a 17 keg party for my senior party. And I think we had 50 people come to a 17 keg party. It's like, everybody had about a third of a keg to drink. So it was crazy.
50 high schoolers with 17 kegs. There's no words. That's a party. That's a big party. So let me ask you this. At what point did drugs enter? And was that just kind of the same social where it was social drinking, and social drinking leads to people who are also socially doing drugs. And so now it just becomes all encompassed together? Or was it the crowd you were hanging? So kind of walk us through there.
Sure. So I started drinking of my own volition when I was about 12, raiding liquor cabinets and things. And then because that experiment went so well, I'm like, well, whatever else is out there has got to be good too. And so, like at 13, started smoking weed, and at 14, trying speed, and 15, cocaine, 16, I don't know, acid mushrooms. And so whatever came along, I had a blast doing all of it. And we would act silly and crack up. And so I'm like, why are adults telling us this is so bad? This is awesome.
This stuff is great.
So
it's not great, kids. If you're listening, it's not great.
No, it's not. And
Side note.
It would take me down paths I didn't want to go to. But at the beginning, it's super attractive. And I loved it. And I was just all I wanted. I was in love with a monster called more.
So I was going to say, was it that this one was okay, so the next one had to be better? Well, this one was okay, but the next one had to be better, and you just kind of bettered up your game every time until you hit the pinnacle of games.
Yep.
So I tell you, I'm amazed that you were able to still keep your grades good. And so was there a stopping point? Like you knew when to stop? Like you had the fun on the weekends and you knew when to stop and be able to be focused and you would pick it back up? Or did you just learn to maintain and keep it all balanced?
It was a slow progression to where it started getting out of sorts. My senior year, I was still excelling in track and things, and I actually got a scholarship to a Division II school, throwing the discus and shot put and javelin. And I went to school, to college, but I was totally focused on partying. So I didn't go to class. I didn't go to track practice. And apparently, those are some requirements. And so I didn't last very long. I only lasted one semester. And that's when the consequences started really coming crashing down on me. And as they did that, I would reach out to drugs and alcohol like a life jacket. And it just, that's when the spiral started. And the more I would lean on that, the more we'd spiral down. I ended up in Texas. I moved down here in the late 80s and was working construction for a time, but living to party to live. Paycheck on Friday, broke on Monday, but had a blast, I think.
But you think you had a wonderful weekend.
Yeah, that's what they told me.
Aren't you glad social media wasn't a thing?
Yes,
then?
Absolutely. I'd have been plastered on it because I did some dumb stuff. I had so many drunk bumps. I can't even imagine some of the stupid things I was doing. But I ended up in the partying on the Strip in Dallas, where a lot of the nightclubs are at. A lot of the Dallas Cowboys were going to. So I saw Tony Dorsett and Too Tall Jones and Harvey Martin and a lot of these famous athletes in the clubs that I was going to. So I thought I'd really arrived. And of course, they didn't know who I was.
Right. But you knew who they were.
Yeah. And so, that meant something to me. I always derived my self-worth in others. Mm-hmm. If I could dazzle you and make you laugh or make you think I was great, then I must be.
Right. You have arrived.
Yes.
And you've accomplished something, which is crazy because I think a lot of people do that, and they don't on purpose so much, that they want to fit in so well. They want to forget about the things where they lack or the areas where they are missing something. That part we always hear, you're missing something. What's the something? Well, is it drugs? No. Is it alcohol? No. Is it sexual behavior? No. But it's something. Something's missing. And so we try to find it in different personalities and different people. And I know for my own self, it's so temporary, but it is a quick feel. Mm-hmm. Like you said, you're there with these famous people and you think, well, I'm here and so are they. So I must be doing something right, because we're hanging out in the same places. And then you leave and, well, I saw so-and-so and so-and-so. We were hanging out. We were in the same room, but, to anybody else as we were hanging out. And so I think we see that a lot of times in college age and 20s and even in the 30s with some people, that they're just striving so badly to plug the hole that's missing.
And it's amazing how the enemy will offer up the imitation. Like all those relationships, they were imitation. They weren't real. They were superficial. They were just proximity. They weren't real relationships.
Right.
But I would offer them up as such. And so it's like the enemy gives you the imitation that you can hold on to when really what you want is the real thing.
Yeah.
And I didn't have any of that.
Yeah. But at the time, it seemed really real. It seemed like it was just right there.
It was all I had.
Yeah. But then it would fade and you'd have to go find the next plug, and then the plug would fade and on and on. So you're living it up. You're in construction, you're partying, you're just waiting on the weekend so you can have a great time, you think. You're pretty sure that's what happened. So where do things change? Where does it go from work, party, work, party, work, party? So this is not what I expected.
You know, I had a relationship in Dallas. I was dating a gal that was a sorority girl at SMU. Great gal, and it went great for a while until I think she saw that there was a Hollywood front that I was putting on, and as she started to see behind it, it deteriorated, and I was really in an emotional wreck, and so when that happened, I typically leaned on drugs and alcohol. That's what I knew to lean on, and I was doing that, and I was distraught over a failed relationship, and about that time, a man introduced me to smoking cocaine. Basically smoking crack.
Right.
And my life fell apart in the course of about 3 or 4 months to the point where I'd hawked just about everything I'd owned. I lost my job. I was about to lose my apartment. I was just driving a piece of junk car. All of my relationships, my friendships had deteriorated. My life was just falling apart. I had nothing. I was miserable.
So you hit rock bottom.
I hit rock bottom.
So drugs and alcohol, the fun, the glory of it all, the partying, it had come to a screeching halt. Yeah,
and then my ex-girlfriend called me one day and she said, "Hey, can you give me some cocaine? I've got some friends coming to town." I said, "I don't have any money." She goes, "I've got the money if you'll get it for me." I go, "Okay." So I went and got her, I don't know, like $500 worth of coke. And on the way back, I thought, I deserve a finder's fee, so I did a little bit. But that woke up my monster, and so I sat in the car all night and did her whole stash.
Oh, wow.
And so by early morning, I'm ducking and dodging her calls, and I did that for a few days. And finally, she got a hold of me. I said, "Matt, just don't panic. I just haven't been able to connect with the guy." Totally lying.
Right.
And
because you've connected all right.
Oh yeah, yeah, it's just
full
gone.
blown connected.
And so I called him up and told him to meet me and bring an ounce this time. And I didn't have a dime in my pocket.
Right.
And so I took a knife and I was going to use that as leverage to get what I wanted and just deal with the repercussions of that later. And when I pulled the knife out on the guy that I was getting that from, who was a friend of mine. I expected, because of our friendship, because, the way we knew each other, that, he'd be disappointed and shocked and whatever, and would have to, deal with it later. But he immediately went into fight or flight mode. And, I understand that now. It surprised me then. And so just out of nowhere, boom, we're in this big melee, and I stabbed him a few times. And he bled to death. And so I took my friend's life over an ounce of cocaine.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a lot.
It is a lot.
So here you are in the moment, not intending to be in that moment. It wasn't, you were just hoping to get yourself out of a bind. But the bind flipped around.
It did. It created a sinkhole in my heart, and then I just immediately afterwards, I just despised who I was, and I don't know. Within minutes, I think the idea of committing suicide came to mind, and really started formulating into a plan. I was basically living on the run, trying to figure out, man, how do I check out of this life and into the next? I was miserable. So I put a plan together. I moved back home for a little bit, and it was going to kind of be a farewell party. I wanted to go see my friends, my family one last time, and then I would just quietly go fade away, and they'd never see me again.
Right.
And fortunately, the criminal justice system reached out and got me, arrested me on a fugitive warrant, brought me back to Texas. And in a few short months, I ended up going to trial and given a life sentence for murder.
So I wrote down a few scriptures that came to mind, and it's funny in this moment. Proverbs 14:12 says, "There's a way that appears to be right, but in the end it leads to death." And I mean, that's the story.
Mm-hmm.
There's a way. The devil's so crafty at putting this picture together that it all looks right. Who's it going to hurt? It's no harm. It's all partying. It's all fun. Don't you love it?
Mm-hmm.
Until you're standing in the moment that leads to death. And of course, we're not. I'm not referring to death of what happened, but the death of life as you know it.
Yeah.
You're now all of a sudden going from a guy who was going to help a friend out and go buy something to, I need to go say goodbye to my people. And either I'm going to fade out or I'm going to do something that takes my own life. But I can't do this anymore because A, what I've done, and B, they're looking for me. And they're probably going to find me if I don't skedaddle. So I just think that's such an important piece right now that the Bible lays that out for us that says, our choices might seem right at the moment, but they lead to destructive circumstances.
Yes, they do. I remember I was standing in the courtroom and the judge looked at me over his glasses and everybody else in the courtroom was looking at me with condemnation. And the judge said, "Mr. Kelley, a jury of your peers has found you guilty of the crime of murder and sentenced you to life in the state penitentiary. Do you have anything to say for yourself?" And Miranda, I stood there, my legs were trembling, and I was trying to grasp at something I could say. And I realized that even then, if I blurted out, "Man, I'm sorry," it would be viewed as crocodile tears. And I couldn't even come up with an explanation how I'd got to that point. It was baffling even to me. And so as I stood there in that courtroom condemned, I realized I had nothing to say. I had no response. I had no defense. I had no reason. I had no voice. So I just stood there quietly and was baffled. And they remanded me to the Texas prison system. I was sent to a unit in East Texas, one of the largest ones in the state. It's almost 4,000 men. What I found is the men in prison use threats and violence to get what they want. They're overgrown children. They're perverse caricatures of men. And I realized that's exactly who I am too. I've qualified for this, and this is going to be my life. You know, I'm going to be around people, and we were fighting over everything. We'd fight over benches and TVs and fight over who could fight who. And it was just, I don't know, it was surreal environment that I was in and that I was stuck in, that I had earned my way into.
So as you lived in that environment, what was the daily motivation was it get up, survive, or was it get up and just try to figure it out? Like what the first few years, what was that transition like?
It was miserable. It was exactly what you're talking about. Just get up and try to survive. I get up and I had to learn the lay of the land, the language, the things that were going on. And it was, it's so foreign to me. I'd spent a night or two in jail from fights or unpaid traffic tickets, but I'd never been to prison. And the vocabulary is different. The jargon, the way people think is just amazing. I'll give you an example. When I first went down, there was a guy in the county jail, and I asked him, "What's it going to be like for me when I go down?" He said, "Well, look, when you get to your unit of assignment, they're going to give you a mattress, a pillow. You'll have your stuff. They're going to put you on a cell block. They're going to open up the door to that cell and tell you to go put your stuff up." He said, "A lot of people go put their stuff up and they stay in there. Don't do that. Put your stuff up, lock the door, and come back out and go to the day room. And when you go to the day room, go to the back of the day room, put your back against the wall, and the first people that come up to talk to you, may just light into them. Fight like your life is hanging in the balance." He said, "Because it really is." He said, "Bryan, everybody there is going to be watching to see if you'll fight for yourself. Make no mistake, they want to know where you're at in the pecking order, and if you'll fight for your stuff." And he said, "So if you'll fight that day, you'll earn everybody's respect. If you don't, your life sentence is going to be miserable."
So you pretty much had to go in and just prove who you were and what you would and wouldn't tolerate.
Right.
Did you do that?
Yeah.
How'd that go?
So I went and I put my stuff up. I got down, did a few push-ups, got amped up. And
Did you think the push-ups were going to
I don't know. I had so much adrenaline pumping. I had to do something. So I go down, I go to the back of the day room, get my back against the wall, and I start pacing back and forth and there's about 75 guys in the day room. And I'm looking at all of them. All right, which one's it going to be? Who's it going to be? Who's it going to be?
Sizing them up.
Yeah. Like, who's looking at me? Who's coming? What's going on? And then, I don't know, 5-10 minutes goes by and everybody's ignoring me. And I'm like,
this is not the way the story's supposed to go.
Yeah, I don't know what to do now. I wasn't told this is going to happen. So, I calmed down a little bit and I ambled over and I was watching some guys playing dominoes at a table. And this young, stocky black kid comes up to me and he said, "Hey, Wood." I said, "What'd you say?" And I started to draw back and make my fist up. He said, whoa, come on. It's cool. It's chill. I see you're going to stay down. And I had no idea what that meant. I thought it meant that if I get hit and go down, I'm going to stay down. And so I'm like, man, I drew back. I started to swim. I said, man, I ain't going to stay down. He said, whoa, dude, chill. That's not what I'm saying. He said, you know what? I'll talk to you later. And he turns around and walks off. And I'm standing there. I'm huffing and puffing. I'm like, what the heck just happened? I didn't even know it. And I found out later that he was paying me respect. When he came up and called me Wood, in Texas prisons, white guys who will fight for themselves are referred to as wood or hardwood or peckerwood.
Mm-hmm.
And so he had already recognized this guy's his amps are
he's been doing his
right
push-ups.
now. Yeah. And so when he called me Wood, he was already recognized, hey, you'll fight. And that's what he was telling me.
Right.
I just didn't know it. And then when he said, I see you're going to stay down, that's the terminology they use in Texas prisons. Say, hey, you're going to fight for your stuff. You're not going to let anybody take it.
Right.
And so, he was coming, paying me great respect, and I almost hit
Just
him.
ready to put him out. So did you fight at all that day?
That day I didn't. What I found out later is there was 24 blocks on that unit, I think. And that was probably the only one on the whole unit that you didn't, they call it the check game. When the new guy comes in, 2, 3, 4 guys are going to fight him to check his heart and see if he'll fight.
Right.
So that's what they call it. That was the only block on the unit that didn't have the check game because there were some older convicts on that block and said, hey, we're not going to live like that. We're just going to let a man's character, stand up and we'll let him stand on that. And so that was the only spot. Even then, I think God had put a hedge of protection around me. And my prison experience, while bizarre in many cases, was just not nearly as bad as it could have been.
Right. What you expected, even from day one, didn't quite pan out that way for you.
Now, I had several fights.
Well, just not on the first,
just on
the first day. Yeah, I'm not talking about the whole time. I'm giving you credit for the first day.
Thank you.
So, one day leads to 10, which leads to 100, which leads to months. Years pass. So as you're, I hate to use the word getting comfortable, because clearly that's not a comfortable place to be, but as you're settling into this new way of living, this new family that surrounds you here in the prison system, what started happening? What did your daily life look like? What was going on? Like, paint a picture for us of how this progresses.
Prison is sameness in everything. We all wear the same dingy white. We all live in the same cell blocks. We all have the same mattresses and pillows and stuff that they sell. And we go to the same chow hall and we eat the same crap. And we walk down the same side of the hallway. We eat with the same people. It's just sameness. And you just become a number. And it's miserable. And so it was just drudgery and emptiness and hopelessness. And it's a cloud that just permeates that, and you feel the hopelessness. And about a year into my incarceration, a guy I'd met and befriended, he said, hey, I want you to go to a prison ministry called Kairos in the chapel. And I said, what's that? I've never even heard of it. And he said, well, what it's going to mean for you is 4 days of home-cooked meals. I said, dude, please sign me up. This food here is terrible. I'll do whatever you need. He said, don't worry, I've got you. As a matter of fact, I'm going to be your waiter, and I'll make sure you are stuffed to the gills every day. And I go, please sign me up. So I went, and Kairos is a prison ministry where 42 Christian men, multi-denominational, come in to engage for 4 days with 42 hand-selected inmates. And they do a series of talks, small group processing, and talk about things like depravity wound, father wound, choices, forgiveness.
Almost like counseling a little bit, but follows a pattern.
Sure.
So that everybody's getting the same thing.
Sure.
Okay.
And, I'd never been around Christian men like that. I've been around some men who said they were Christian. I'm not sure that that's as accurate as they think it is. And being around the men I was at in prison, the men that came in were different. They had joy, they had hope, they had peace, they had love, but yet they had strength, and you could see it. And so they just baffled me, and I'm asking them questions. I'm poking and prodding. And I'm like, where do men like you come from? I've never encountered men like you before. And I bonded with a little Lutheran preacher from San Angelo who had went to Kansas University near where I grew up. And so for 2 days, we talked about Kansas, and he won my trust.
Mm-hmm.
And to that point, Miranda, I had never admitted to anybody I was guilty of my crime. I lied at trial. I'd lied to my family. I lied to my friends. I was even lying to the guys in prison. I don't even know why. I don't even care. But I'd never told anybody. And so finally, he won my trust. And being around those men of the light, I couldn't carry that darkness anymore.
Right.
And so I told him, I said, I need to tell you something. So I pulled him to the side, and I just broke down, and I told him all about my crime. And he listened to me so patiently. And then he looked at me. He said, Bryan, he said, I'm so honored that you would share that with me first. That is huge. Now I want to tell you something. I forgive you.
Oh, wow.
And I crumbled. I never dreamed that anybody would ever tell me those words. And so, man, I was a big mud puddle. And he let me get it together. And he said, Bryan, although I forgive you, and that's real, you need to ask God to forgive you. And guess what? He will. And I said, yeah, Keith, I hear you, but I can't. And he said, I don't understand. Why not? And I said, well, Keith, I don't deserve forgiveness. I deserve this or worse. I'll take my medicine. And he looked at me, he smiled, and he even chuckled a little bit. And he said, wow, I didn't realize when I came here this weekend I was going to meet somebody that was smarter than God.
Oh.
I said, well, hold up. I didn't say that. He said, you sure did. You said God would forgive you. You admitted that. If you ask him, you tell him about this. But no, of course, you know how to handle this better than he does. How has your program worked out for you, Bryan? I'm like, ouch. It hasn't. I don't know how to live.
Right. Like, I'm here.
Yeah.
Clearly it's not going the right way.
And he goes, exactly. You're never going to have any joy, peace, purpose, love, hope in your life until you let go and give this to him. He knows it anyway. Why are you trying to act like he doesn't? Hand this over to him. I just stood there on May 28, 1994, and I'm like, what do I got to lose? So I got down on my knees, and I said, God, here's the broken pieces of my life. It's nothing but trash. I'm sorry. It's such a bad deal. Here, you do something with it. I can't. And I began to learn that day, and I'm still learning it now, that God can take broken pieces and make a masterpiece.
So that's a year in. So you spend a year, we'll say floundering around for a year, because I'm sure that was, like you said, lots of fights, lots of learning. So you have a year in. I have a question here. There's 4,000 inmates. How did you land in the 42 that would be picked? You said 42
because
was chosen.
the guy I had befriended, he had went through it previously, and they did kind of a recruitment process. So he was able to nominate me.
So by God putting somebody in your path to befriend,
yep,
it led to you finding who God was.
It's always relationships, isn't it?
And the forgiveness. He knows what he's doing.
Yes, he does.
So you're a year in. We've had this transformation, but we still have a lot of years to go.
Yeah, it didn't get me out of the consequences of my crime. I'd still do 20 years after that date, but I knew I was on a different path. I knew I was living for something else. Miranda, I desperately wanted to be part of the solution instead of part of the problem. I just didn't know how. And when I made that declaration with God, I was like, hey, you show me how. He will.
So being in that program, at year 2. Did you stay attached to that program in some way? Were you able to do that your whole way through?
Kind of. One of the things they do after the 4-day weekend is they encourage everybody to come back and do basically weekly men's groups, parent share groups. And so I started doing that. And that was something that was revolutionary for me. I had never got together regularly with intentionality and met with other men. And oh my gosh, I just loved it. So we met out on the rec yard every Saturday morning at 8:00, and we prayed and we talked about our fledgling faith and how we were working through that and struggling to work through that. But there were so many times when God confirmed that He is real, that what He'd done in our life was real. And I'll give you an example. There was a young man in that group who had just given his life to Christ. He had been in prison for 17 years for killing his girlfriend and driving around for 3 days with her in the trunk. And he's from a small town too, and he cast a lot of shame on his family, and they barely had anything to do with him. He had never talked to his brother since he'd been locked up for 17 years. And so he asked us, please pray for reconciliation with my family, especially my brother. He hasn't talked to me since the trial. And so, man, we were on it. Well, we believed in God, and we believed He moved mountains, and He would move this mountain. So we prayed, and the next Saturday we showed up and we said, well, what happened? We were expecting,
right?
Full
Seize the part.
Yeah. And he just shook his head. And he goes, we just keep praying. I haven't heard anything. We're like, okay, we're on it. He's going to do something. And so about, 10 or 15 minutes later, we were talking about something else, and he started looking off in the distance. And pretty soon he stood up and he was kind of tilting his head and he was looking. We're like, what are you doing? And he said, it's a long way and I'm not sure, but I swear that was my brother that just walked through the front gate of the prison. And about 10 minutes later, they called him to visit. And we found out later that day that week, his brother had given his life to Christ, and he knew the very first thing he needed to do was to come and reconcile with his brother. And we were strutting around.
I bet you guys had a different kind of party that day.
Oh man, where I'm like, this is real.
Yeah, look at this. This is happening.
Yeah.
But here's the skeptic in me, right? Well, it's not skeptic, but I'll play bad cop here. I'm not wanting to just assume that this made the next 19 years a walk in the park in prison.
Oh, it didn't.
You have something to hold on to. You have a foundation there. These moments like this definitely give you hope to wake up the next morning and re-meet with these guys. But did you ever become a target because you were in this group? Were you ever...
I've seen some of that. It never was for me. I got so deeply involved and engaged with the guys around me that there was always a core group of us that we were earnest, we were authentic, we were seeking God, we recognized that we didn't know anything and we were trying to learn. So I think even whether it's an inmate or somebody on the street corner or somebody from the pulpit, real recognizes real. And people, are all right with that. Even gang members will stop and recognize real. Like I've heard and I've seen a lot of guys who are in a gang in prison who say, I want to get out. I want to follow the Lord. And typically their gang brothers will say, okay, but it better be real. If we find you half-stepping, we're going to beat you down.
Yeah. So they want authentic.
Yeah.
Whether it's good or bad.
Yeah.
You just be true to who you are.
Correct.
So time progresses. We're at 10 years, 15 years. Still, like you said, every day's the same day. It's not Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. It's, well, here we go again. But you have this foundation. You have this core group of guys that you can go to, hang out with, partner up with. Brothers. Really, that's brothers in Christ that you're arming up with. Are you guys having, outside of your time with quiet times or devotionals or Bible studies, are you still being taught more the word from this group that comes in? Do they come in and still do 4-day weekends? Did they still pour into you and just keep giving you more and more and more so that you can just hold on a little tighter still?
After my conversion, I dove into everything. I tried to absorb education, spirituality, things that I'd never cared about before. I went back to school. I earned a degree in psychology. I wanted to learn about myself, so that's the degree plan I chose. I got a bachelor's in psychology. I went to recovery, got super involved with AA and NA. I started reading my Bible, and I started going to the chapel. Now, the unfortunate thing about prison chapels is you get every wind of doctrine. Everybody comes in. They've got to have access to that. So you get this hybrid amalgamation of faith things, and it gets more confusing than anything.
Right.
And so I was struggling. Holy Spirit was teaching me the practical things in Scripture, and a man steps up that would disciple me for 10 years straight. We lived together, and we also worked together, and he was super strong in doctrine and theology. Matter of fact, he had spoke at the Southern Baptist Convention with Dr. Criswell, like in the early 70s. And he had fallen from grace and earned himself a nice prison sentence. But he would just took me under his wing. And every day we would talk about the fundamentals of Christianity and how we were applying that in our lives or failing to. So he taught me how to go through the Bible. He taught me to listen to radio preachers like Chuck Swindoll, David Jeremiah, J. Vernon McGee, Tony Evans, Stephen Davey. And so I was listening to them. I was asking him questions. I was getting stuff from Dallas Theological Seminary, and I was really processing doctrine and theology, and I just couldn't get enough. I was diving in, learning more. And as I was getting filled up by others or by books, I would pour that out into other men. So I was leading Bible study groups, sharing prayer groups, recovery groups.
So in my notes again, I had a reference to Psalm 34:18. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. So I picture your first year in so crushed. I would think the reason why you really probably hadn't confessed it to anybody, and even trial, that makes sense because you're trying not to go to prison, but your family was probably because you had not really dealt with it in yourself and really said even to yourself, yeah, I've done this and I've dealt with it. Because I can imagine that you were probably very confused and very out of sorts from how did this happen? How did I get here? A loss of self. But what I see on your 2 is that God says, I see you. I see you. I see where you're at, but I want to draw near to you, and I want to help you do this because I have a plan for your life. I still have a plan for your life. And there wasn't enough drugs, there wasn't enough alcohol that you could do to mess it up. And so he gives you this amazing opportunity to brother up with a guy who leads you into this. And whereas I know the next 20 years were not a walk in the park, look at how you dove into all these things. You had a new mission. You had a whole new thought pattern on what life could be like, even though you were behind bars and kept from the general society. You had a new faith. You had a new belief system, and He sustained you through that.
He did. He empowered me to have my own mission, my own ministry on the inside. At that time, I didn't know if I would ever get out of prison. And so I desperately wanted my life to be worth something here and worth something for the kingdom. And so even if I never got out of prison, if I dove in and helped others not to make the mistakes that I did, I felt like that was going to be good enough. And
right.
So, man, that's what I dove into. And I was teaching people to read. I was a college tutor. I was teaching different things on the unit. I was super involved in recovery and sponsoring guys. And, there are so many blessings, so many relationships that I still have this day that started from just working together, discipling somebody in prison day in and day out. We always talk about in prison when I get out to the free or out to the free world, like this isn't really part of the world. This
right.
is a microcosm that's different, that's on Mars
right.
or something, but it's not. It is a subset, but it is just a part of the world. Or
but
part
it's
of
a very
society.
real reality.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there are people as we speak right now over this whole nation that are sitting, serving for consequences, the choices they made.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, it might feel like, I could see where it would feel like, yeah, this is not really the real world, but the real world's still happening around you. So you get a life sentence, but I don't know if you know this, you're not there.
I'm aware of that.
I just wonder if you know that you're not there. So how do we go from a life sentence, and you knew that, you went in knowing that, so you're sitting here?
So, in a weird quirk of sentencing, in Texas at that time, a life sentence was calculated at 60 years. And if you have time built up, you're eligible for parole at that time when you've got a quarter of your sentence done. And I could even use some of my good time and work time to build that. So I actually became parole eligible after just 6 years on a life sentence. Now, I started a series of denials that we call set-offs in Texas, and I was actually set off 12 different times. I came up for parole 12 times and was denied parole, and every single time I was told, you're doing everything just right, keep it up, denied.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as I cleared the 20-year mark, I was at a prison unit in Hondo, just west of San Antonio, and I got to meet with a parole commissioner, a voting member. And the conversation changed since I'd cleared 20 years. And he was telling me what parole was going to be like for me when I got out. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, oh my God, this guy's telling me I'm my parole. Oh my God. And so after his little spill, he goes, do you have any questions? And I said, yes, sir, I've got one. And he said, what is it? And he probably thought I was going to say, are you going to vote for me?
Yeah. Did I get your vote today?
And I looked at him. I said, will you give me parole next year? And he looked at me. He said, I don't think I understand. Are you asking me to stay in prison for another year? And I said, well, yes, sir. And he said, why? Why would you ask me to do that? And I said, well, I really want to go through the prison entrepreneurship program and develop a business plan that I've got and work with their volunteers and kind of hone my ideas. But the only way I can do it is if you give me a hard release date for next year. Otherwise, I can't be housed on that unit. It's a pre-release. And Miranda, he stared at me, I bet 60 seconds without blinking.
You think he was shocked?
I don't know if he was trying to read me. I don't know if he's trying to process. I don't know. But finally, he just looked at me and goes, let me look into that. And a lot of times in prison, when an official tells you that, they've blown you off. And
right.
I'm like, well, so what? I've made parole. Big deal.
Yeah.
But the next day I called my mom and she goes, oh my God, you've made parole. But it's not until the middle of next year and nobody knows why. I'm calling all over to find out why. And I said, well, quit calling. That's what I asked for. And she goes, oh. And so basically I bargained for an extra year in prison after doing 20 to go through the program that for the last 5 years I've been the CEO of.
So now is that, you said you had a business plan. So did you formulate your own company or did you just come out and join in with another plan? So like this, you go through the program you wanted to be in for the year. When it was time to go, was that your own business idea, your own plan, or what was that? How did that work?
The business plan that I built when I was on the inside was a nonprofit called Leaders and Ladders. And it's to help at-risk youth develop life skills and job skills that would benefit them and welcome them into a productive role in society. I would do that with retired craftspersons and business people. And it's very similar to what I do at PEP, but geared towards at-risk youth that we might otherwise lose and they would have to go through PEP.
Right.
So I was trying to get them closer at the start of the road than at the end.
Than when they're already in the system.
Yeah.
So you get out, that moment, is it surreal? Is it hard? Is going back in the real world what you thought? Like, what does that look and feel like?
It was surreal. You get shipped to the Huntsville unit to be released at that point, and I had a cellie for one night that came from another unit. And, of course, we're both really excited. We know we're getting out the next day. And so we're up all night drinking coffee and telling stories. And I basically told him my testimony. And about 3 o'clock in the morning, and he said, Bryan, can I ask you a question? I said, sure. And he thought for a long time, and he looked at me and he said, "Do you think you had to kill that guy to become the man you are today?"
Mm.
And I went, "Wow, that's a great question." And, I thought about it for a little bit, and I said, sadly, to become this man, yes, I did. Could I have been a different man, honorable man? And could I have listened to God earlier on and done good things? Yeah, but I would have been different. But I am this guy today. And I said, it reminds me of my life scripture, which is Romans 8:28, that God is in all things for good for those who love him and are called according to his purpose. Basically telling me that he can use even this situation for good if I just give it to him.
Yep.
And my life has been a constant proving that scripture is true, that you hand this over to him and he's in all things for good.
So you work with what company? What's the name of your company you work with now?
Prison Entrepreneurship Program.
And so did you go straight into that?
I went to their transitional house in Dallas when I got out. The plan had always been for me to go to my mom's. She was in San Antonio, but I told her at our graduation that I was going to go to the PEP halfway house in Dallas, and her bottom lip started quivering. She said, "Why?" And I said, "Mom, I'm 48. It's time for me to stand on my own 2 feet. You've been amazing, and nobody can replace a mother's love, but it's time for me to stand on these feet. And then when I get established, I come back as a benefactor and not a burden." And so she said, "Okay."
So now you work with kids before they get into the system, but you also go in the prisons as well and do prison ministry still. Do you do it with the company you're with now, or is that with this group that actually transformed and changed your life?
I do it with them. I do it with both of them. I can't really get enough. Yeah, I'll do it. I've done it with several people, and so I don't know. I feel like, especially now that the fact that I've been out for 9 years, I'm a homeowner, I've been a CEO of a company, I'm an elder at a church, I've been invited to the White House twice, I get called all over the country to go speak about prison reform and my own personal journey, and so I'm an example to the guys who are just like me to go back in and say, "Hey, you can turn this around
if you choose to.
I am nothing special,
Right?
God's special, and he can do it."
So let's do like one example from each. Let's talk about youth. Is there a story that comes to mind with one of the youth where you've seen just you being able to pour your story and your choices and turn around?
I went to a halfway house for juvenile offenders up in Dallas some years ago, and I was going over to find out if our released graduates from PEP could be like big brothers to those kiddos, because they're so hard to get through to.
Mm-hmm.
And I went in by myself to just get the lay of the land. It was a very secure place, 2 locked doors you had to get through. And when I walked in, there was about 25 kids in this place. They were playing video games or watching basketball. And the minute you walk in the door, they turn around to look to see who's invading their space. And they looked at me, and you just saw this look of disgust on their face. And it was like they were going, "Oh, great, another old white dude from church.
Here we go again."
And I saw that look on their face, and I just didn't say anything, just acclimated and, fit in, talked about basketball. And so at dinner, the director asked me to give a brief testimony. And I said, "Yeah, I'd be happy to." And I said, "Hey, guys, I know what it's like to be you." And one of them actually shook his head and goes, "Whatever." And I said, "No, I just got out of prison." And then they all set up and they looked at me and they were like, "What?" I said, "Yeah, matter of fact, how many of you guys in here are 22 years old or older?" And they're like, "None of us. We're 15, 16, 17, 18. I go, "You know what? I did more time in prison than you've been alive."
Oh my gosh.
There's nothing you can tell me about prison I don't know. And then their eyes got bugged out, and I got mobbed. They were around me in concentric circles, asking me a ton of questions. And the number one question they asked me, and it blew me away, I wasn't prepared for it, was, "My dad's in prison. Do you know him?"
Oh.
And
hoping to make a connection.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, man.
So there was a young man there that I asked him, I said, "How soon are you getting out of this place?" And he said, 2 weeks. I go, "Oh, man, you're a short timer." And he laughed. And I said, what's the first thing you want to do? And he said, get laid.
No.
He said it in different words, but
Right.
we'll just call it that. And I laughed. And I said, well, I understand that. Believe me. But are you prepared to be a father? And he said, what are you talking about? I just said I want to get laid. And I said, well, we've all been talking about here that our dad's in prison or we don't know him, and we've had that big void in our life, and it's been negative impact. So are you ready to be that stand-up dad? He said, dude, I just said I want to get laid. And I said, well, one kind of follows the other.
Yeah.
And so I want you to stop and think about that. And he looked at me like, what are you talking about? So, but, I remember what it's like to be those young, hard-headed kids, who think you've got it all figured out.
And then have somebody try to explain to you their journey, and it gets your attention, but it's just not enough sometimes not enough to get over the hump.
Twice I took a van load of our graduates over to the halfway house for juvenile offenders, and we hung out for the afternoon. And it was absolutely magical because our men are credible messengers. They've went down the ugly road and they've come back, and the kids listen to them. And so both times when we left, and I was driving the van away from that place, I looked back in the rearview mirror and men were crying because it was so special. And they saw that even their wrecked, ugly life was able to be used for good.
Yeah. Your story is amazing. And what I really love about it is how you've taken your past experiences and turned them into a source of strength and motivation to help youth and those behind bars. And guess what? Even people in the normal real world, because I see you at church and I see you out and about, and you just pour into people. It's not, there's not like a label like, oh, well, I can just relate to this or I can relate to that. You pour into everybody, which I told you when you got here in our notes, it's like, there's a part in here that's for me. So don't look at it and wonder, what is she talking about? So I wanted to share what happened at our church the Sunday that you became an elder, as you mentioned. So I didn't know we were having Elder Sunday. So I'm just in church holding down the seat that I always hold down. It wasn't a Sunday for me to be on stage. So I was in my seat, and they come up and they explain that there's an elder leaving and that you are the new elder. And that moment just overcame me. And I sat there and I was just like, this has to be the most amazing thing I've ever seen in church. Because unfortunately, I've been raised in Baptist church. I went to Pentecostal church for a little while. I'm like kind of a Pentecostal Baptist. I don't know, something in the middle. And but you rarely see the church embrace people that aren't like everybody else. It's just not been my experience. And what's cool about the church we go to is that it's the second time I've seen that. This summer, before I spoke at the women's group, a week before, I was struggling with what I was going to share exactly about my testimony. And, because honestly, church is not the first place you always hear the whole story. I'm just going to be honest.
Right.
And the week before I was supposed to speak, our women's minister got up and she literally laid some things on the ground. Like, I'd never heard a woman in church be so bold and so blunt and so honest about the things they had done. It's always just kind of under the carpet, like, oh, I have a story, and everybody has a story, and it's just lightly touched on. But she lays it out. And in that moment, God goes, see, this is what people need. People need people to be authentic. People need to know what it really looks like for me to redeem. And so the next week I was able to go, and I just laid out who I was on the line. Like, I just said, here's the things, here it all is. And again, your story that day, I stood there and I was really emotional, and I'm looking at you because I knew your story, and I was just going, this right here is a day that I hope everybody in this church never forgets. That it doesn't matter what you did and who you were. When you were washed in Christ, you became new.
Amen.
You're new. And so that is a part of who you are. Absolutely. You can't go back and change that. You can't go and do all that. And becoming a Christian doesn't make it disappear. But you take it like you've done and turn it into a testimony and then give it to God. And now you're standing on the stage becoming a church elder. And I was going, yes, yes, this right here. This is right here. Because you know what? Church is a place for the sick. We are a place for the sick. We are supposed to take the sick in and love on them and help heal them and then push them to a higher level. And I was so proud of our church, and I was thinking, if I am this proud, I don't know how he must feel standing on this stage knowing like this is a full circle moment right here. This is a complete full circle moment. Like, I don't know how you didn't just cry and cry and cry and cry and cry on that stage, because I was in my seat doing that. I was just like, this is the kind of place I want to be involved in, where we can love on people for who they are and not who they were. And we can exalt that because it doesn't matter. Because in Christ, we're all new people. I didn't say we were perfect people. I didn't say we don't mess up sometimes, but we're changed. And that moment for me was huge. And I was just so proud for you. And I think your mom was there that day.
Yes,
I don't know how I don't see how she didn't cry and cry and cry and cry.
She was a mess.
Everybody was a mess. And then even since then, because that was a pretty big moment, you recently had a really big moment, like another life-changing moment just a couple weeks ago. Has it been weeks? Has it been a month yet since we did Here Comes the Bride?
It's been 6 weeks.
Already?
Yeah, time flies when you're married and having fun.
Yeah. So how was that experience? Like, how is married life?
You know, I didn't get married until I was 57 years old. And I've told Jill that while there were times when I was trying to rush down the aisle and it never worked out, I'm so thankful that it has taken this amount of time that I've waited on her, because it's been absolutely spectacular. It feels like every day is the honeymoon, and I just absolutely love it. And we're in such alignment in our thought, in our belief, and our focus on the church and everything. And so it's like every time something comes up, I'm like, hey, where are you at with this? And she'll tell me, and we're like, yep, we're in alignment.
I love it because Jeremiah 29:11 says, "For I know the plans I have for you, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope in a future." And I think he gave you hope year 2, and he has certainly gave you a future.
He has certainly done that for me.
So as we conclude, what would be a message of hope that you could share with people today, thinking that maybe they've gone too far for God to love them or save them or give them hope for the future?
You know, there's a ton of scriptures that come to mind, but I think Ephesians 2:10, I think it summarizes it for me. And I mentioned something earlier about my life was in broken pieces, and God turned it into a masterpiece. And Ephesians 2:10 says that we are God's workmanship, created in Christ Jesus unto good works. And the word for workmanship in the Greek is poema, from which we get the word poem. So it's basically saying we are God's poem, created in Christ Jesus for good works. But that word's also rendered in other places masterpiece. And so if we think about that, God can take the broken pieces of our life and turn us into a poem, a love letter to tell the world about his goodness. And so as I was up there on the stage getting ordained as an elder, I realized this is another chapter in the poem of my life that God is talking about. Not how great Bryan is. We all know that's not the case. It's how great he is. And he can shine most in the most broken people if we'll let him, if we'll put our yes on the table.
I love that. We're living a life, a poem with chapters. And oh, man, that's great. Well, today we've been on an incredible journey with you, Bryan, exploring your past, talking about your time behind bars and the remarkable transformation that has defined your life. Throughout your story, we've heard the profound impact of hope, faith, and belief in second chances. It's a testament to God's capacity to offer and want redemption and renewal in our lives through him. As we wrap up this episode, I encourage you to think about the power of second chances, not just for those who have experienced the criminal justice system, but for all of those that are on their own unique journey, because we each have our own poem book with our own unique journey. I just want to express right now a huge thank you to you for coming today, just for being open and honest, being willing to share your story and how this journey has changed you and how you're going out and changing others. And I want to thank you for the work that you're doing and offering the same opportunity to those who are in prison and those who we're trying to keep out of prison. And mainly, I want to thank you for being a model for all of us in the real world. That was my air quotes. Because, I mean, you're living it out. I'm not saying you're perfect. None of us are. But you're always there. You're always investing. You're always pouring, just pouring and pouring. And I see that. And I know the others see it too. So I just want to thank you for all of that. And are there any resources or helplines that are out there for listeners who might possibly be struggling, or maybe they've gotten out of the system, they don't know where to go? Is there any resources or web pages, or does your company do anything that they can get involved in if need be?
In the past, we have only taken men that we started working with on the inside and helped post-release, but we built a second chance incubator and accelerator for returning citizens who are interested in launching a business. And that's now housed on the East End Maker Hub on the east side of Houston. It's called the PP Collider, and we want to open that up to returning citizens who are passionate about launching a business idea. I've always encouraged people to get involved with your local church and not just go there on Sunday. Get involved, get to know people,
relationship,
serve, yes, and there, we offer Regeneration, which is a Christ-based 12-step program that is for anything. It's not just drug and alcohol. It could be for any sin patterns that we've got in our life. You're overeating or binge watching Netflix, or stuck on social media, overspending, or pornography, or whatever. And so, just peel the onion back and let God search your heart and reveal to you those things that are blocking you from the abundant life in Christ that He came to give us.
Amen. So listeners, I want to invite you to share your thoughts and stories related to today's story of redemption and second chances. There will be a message button attached to Bryan's episode in our social media. We also have a webpage, www.steppingforward, that's fwd.org. We have a message button there. We would love for you to share your thoughts or share your stories with us. And in ending, I just wanted to remind you guys that no matter where life is taking you or what challenges you face, there's always room for growth, change, and the possibility of a brighter tomorrow. Thank you for joining us and being here with us on this inspiring episode of Southern Soul Chats.
Thank you for joining us on today's episode of Southern Soul Chats. We hope you found inspiration, encouragement, and valuable insights to carry with you through your week. We invite you to subscribe to Southern Soul Chats so that you never miss an episode. We are a branch of Stepping Forward Ministries, a 501c3 Christian nonprofit, and we kindly ask for you to consider making a donation today. Your contribution will play a vital role in sustaining the podcast and allowing us to continue sharing these impactful stories of faith. As you leave today, remember your story is a part of a bigger narrative, and your faith has power to guide your path. Keep stepping forward with hope, trust, and assurance that you're never alone. This is Dr. Miranda Ferguson. We hope you have a great week and keep stepping forward.